Buenos dias from Granada, Spain. I'm David G, and in this video I'll be going over some common mistakes that can really put a dent in your trip to Spain. I'm starting my video standing in front of Granada and its beautiful Alhambra, and it's not by coincidence that I'm standing here. When traveling to Spain, there's a high likelihood that you'll enter via larger cities such as Madrid or Barcelona. All of Spain's cities have a lot to experience, and Madrid and Barcelona are both heavy hitters with a ton to offer. But smaller cities, such as Granada, are worth visiting too. Visitors to Spain often miss out on a ton of what this country has to offer by not visiting smaller cities. And the Alhambra and the not-so-big city of Granada is a great example of this. Granada and its Alhambra are just one example of what you can miss out on by not prioritizing some smaller cities on your trip to Spain. Of course, you have to be realistic with the amount of time you'll have in Spain, but even just a long weekend in Madrid could leave you enough time for a day trip to neighboring Toledo. But regardless of where you end up deciding to visit in Spain, there's certain to be something in common with all of them: the siesta. The thing is, it's really easy to forget about the siesta when you're planning a trip to Spain. And if you do forget about it, it can cause a huge hassle. In Spain, the times at which you do things might just have to change some. The word siesta can literally mean nap in Spanish, but in Spain it's more like a kind of break period. Some people may take naps, but during my entire year living in Madrid, I never met anybody that took a nap during the siesta. Nap or not, many businesses will close their doors during the siesta, especially local ones. Larger businesses such as grocery stores or gas stations will generally stay open during the siesta, but it's always worth double checking to make sure they actually will stay open. The siesta usually takes place between about 2 and 5 p.m. And after that long break in the day, the typical day in Spain tends to run a bit later than in other countries. In addition to the mistake of not considering the siesta when planning a trip to Spain, another mistake that folks often make is not taking Spanish eating times into consideration. Breakfast is usually eaten pretty much first thing in the morning. Usually it consists of like a coffee or tea and then some kind of pastry to go with it, or maybe a piece of bread with tomato or jamon on it. But there can really be wide regional differences in what people eat. A lot of Spaniards will also eat a snack between breakfast and lunch later in the morning. Then lunch usually starts around 2 p.m., coinciding with the beginning of the siesta. Typically, lunch will consist of a set menu with a few courses. When eating out, you can usually find a set menu starting at around 10 euros that includes dessert and a drink. And in Spain, a glass of wine or a beer with lunch is totally okay. Dinner is where Spain really differs a lot from most other countries, with dinner usually starting around 10 p.m. The majority of restaurants will start to reopen for dinner around 8 p.m. So if you're used to eating dinner earlier, it's really important to keep this in mind. And with a good idea of when things will happen in Spain, it's probably a good idea to know what language they'll happen in too. Let me give you a hint. It's not English. About half of the population is estimated to speak some English, but the amount of people that can speak English above a basic level is definitely less than that. In places that tourists frequent, the chance of English being spoken is much higher. And then there are certain areas of the country with a large population of English-speaking retirees. But there's no guarantee that English will be spoken by everyone anywhere, really. The best thing you can do for yourself is to know enough Spanish to get around. I have a video to help you get started with that in just 5 minutes. But if you just don't have the time to practice some basic Spanish, at least make sure to have a translation app downloaded and ready to go. Google Translate is a good one, and so is Deeple. While we've established that you flat out won't be able to just get around with English in Spain, sometimes people won't want to speak Spanish either. Parts of Spain like Catalonia, the Basque Country, Valencia, the Balearic Islands, and Galicia have their own local languages. Nearly everybody in Spain can speak Spanish, but locals may prefer to speak their own local language. I always find that it's completely acceptable to just know a few words in the local language and then carry on in Spanish with the rest of the conversation. Once when I was in a smaller town in Catalonia, a friendly shopkeeper just kept on speaking Catalan to me. I kept up my side of the conversation in Spanish, and there were no hard feelings, and we were able to understand each other. Even though some of Spain's languages may be similar enough to Spanish to be mutually understood, they are not dialects of Spanish and never should be referred to as such. The different languages of Spain are strongly related to regional identities, and it can be considered super disrespectful to accidentally minimize their legitimacy. And on the topic of identity in Spain, another mistake to avoid is bringing up recent history on a whim. I don't mean like talking about when Spain won the World Cup in 2010. You can definitely bring that up. I'm talking about Spain's recent history of civil war and dictatorship. The Civil War was brutal, as was the dictatorship, and they're both touchy topics that people are gradually dealing with. I'm not saying never talk about these things, but they're not topics that it's usually acceptable to bring up to someone that you don't know well in Spain. So the chances of it being appropriate to discuss these topics with someone while you're on a short vacation in Spain are most likely really low. So moving on to a funner topic, Another mistake that people often make when traveling to Spain is failing to realize that a lot of things are free here. Even food can be free in Spain, and this comes in the form of tapas. So you order your drink, of course you pay for your drink, but magically appearing is some other food which you don't pay for. So while you might be able to pay for the same food that comes with a drink, better just buy a drink that's much cheaper and continue to get endless plates of free food with it. If you've got some museums that you plan on visiting when you're in Spain, chances are that if you plan ahead, you can get in free too. World famous museums like the Prado in Madrid or the Picasso Museum here in Malaga offer free entrance days. So if you plan ahead, you can save on paying for the entrance fee and invest in some cheap drinks with free tapas instead. If you're driving in Spain, another thing that often comes in a free and paid version is parking. Sometimes the free parking requires a little bit of pre-planning to find, but most of the time it's out there somewhere. But you don't necessarily need a car to get around easily in Spain. Public transport in Spain is generally really good, but it does depend a little bit on where you go. Sometimes it might actually make more sense to take a taxi if you're traveling in a large group during hours when public transport isn't operating. But the majority of the time, taxis are much more expensive than public transport, and they're not necessarily much faster either. In fact, I once had a friend that visited me when I was living in Madrid, and they insisted on taking taxis everywhere. When we wanted to go out to a restaurant, I knew that there was a direct bus route to get there and it would cost a lot less than a taxi. But they insisted on calling a taxi, and as the taxi arrived, the bus arrived just down the street too. Since the bus had a special lane with less stoplights, it actually got there before us and was pulling away as we got out of our expensive taxi. Sometimes, public transport in Spain can actually be faster than taxis. The moral of the story? Always check your route in an app like Google Maps. While you'll want to keep these common mistakes in mind when planning a trip to Spain, don't stress too much. After living in Spain myself for an entire year and traveling here about a dozen other times, I can safely stand here and say that Spain is a great place to visit. I sincerely hope that this video has given you the insight that you were looking for, and if it has, then make sure to give it a like. You can also drop a comment if you'd like. We'd love to hear from you. And I'm always working on more videos, so make sure to subscribe to stay in the loop. Muchas gracias for watching, and hasta luego!